Hey everybody, I'm Garcia, and today I'm taking a look at one of the two-player only offerings for the Cerberus deck building system. This is Teen Titans Go deck building game. In this game, much like in the DC deck building game and the other spin-offs from that system, each player is going to start with a small deck of cards, a very weak deck, and you are going to be buying new cards from the lineup, adding them to your deck, strengthening your deck, attacking the supervillains and defeating them, and trying to, at the end of the game, have a higher score than, in this case, your one opponent. This is just for two people, though it is compatible with all those other games. So you could, mix and match, you could combine them and play a multiplayer game. So I'm going to be showing you just what's in here, give you a brief overview of how the game works. If you are already familiar with the DC deck building game, feel free to skip the overview and just go right to my final thoughts if you'd like to listen to those. But without further ado, here we go. Alright, so let me briefly go over the basics of the game here. Each player has their opening deck here, their starting deck. You're going to shuffle that up. You put out 5 cards from the main deck. We've got starter cards over here called Titan Go. You can buy those. Weaknesses you might be given. And then the Nemesis pile that you are trying to get through, destroy these guys, get a bunch of victory points. You are going to end the game by either running out the stack of Nemesis or by running out the deck, and you can no longer replenish the line. Each player is going to draw 5 cards to begin, and then you go back and forth taking turns. On my turn, I can play as many cards from my hand as I want to. These cards are normally going to have powers, events, actions, or they'll give me power, like the starting card Punch here says +1 power. I have 4 of those, and I have one of these snack time cards, which simply allow me to get rid of a weakness. Useless right now. So I've got 4 power. That lets me buy cards. So I could, for 4, buy this superpower here, Snake Form, because that costs 3. I could buy one of the Titans Go cards. That costs 3. I could even buy this Beaver Form for 2, and this Killer Moth for also 2, for a total of 4. So I'm going to do that. I'll take this one, and I take this one. I buy them both. I put them in my discard pile. And then at the end of the turn of my turn, I clean up by discarding everything I played and anything I still have in my hand, all right? And then I'm going to draw a new hand of 5 cards. If I ever need more cards than there are, I reshuffle the discard pile. Then it's my opponent's go. They are going to, they would have had a hand already of 5 cards, by the way. They replenish the center line up to 5 cards, and they do the same thing. 3 power, they'll buy Snake Form, discard the rest of their hand, draw a new hand of 5 cards. This continues. You can also, quote-unquote, defeat one of these Nemesis cards. The first one here always being Control Freak and costing 8. So if I'm able to get up to 8, I can destroy this character. Also goes in my discard pile. It'll cycle through my deck and give me some powers. And as I said, at the end of the game, you're going to add up victory points. The victory points show up on the bottom corners of all the cards with a little star and a number inside of that star. And so, for example, this one here, Aqualad, has 1 victory point at the end of the game, whereas Control Freak here, if I defeat him and put him in my deck, he's worth 4 victory points. Some cards are going to give you weaknesses. They also end up in your discard pile as they cycle through your deck. You have to play them when they come up in your hand. And there are a few cards that are going to allow you to attack your opponent. There are some cards that let you defend from those attacks, and so on. Couple of different things in the game. So each player at the beginning of the game would have chosen one of these superheroes. So let's say I am Robin. The player across from me is going to be Raven. So we would have either been dealt one of these randomly or chosen one, and this card is going to allow you to have some special powers throughout the game. In this case, I have Robin here, and it says, once during each of my turns, if I control a hero and an equipment, I get +1 power, and I draw a card. So I would be allowed to apply that whenever the time comes up. The other cards that were not chosen would all be flipped over to their sidekick side and placed aside somewhere on the table. just put over on the side. And then whenever you qualify to recruit them, and they tell you how you do that, then you can take one of these and add them to your display, and you now have your hero and one or more sidekicks. You could have them all. And there are lots of cards that allow you to gain sidekicks, steal sidekicks from your opponents, lose them, things like that. So basically the way to you gain these is as follows. I'll read you a couple here. So we've got Beast Boy. It says, recruit, play 2 superpowers. If you control a superpower, you get +1 power on your turn. That's a lot of the word power. So play 2 superpowers, you can take control of him. Starfire says play 2 cards with cost 1 or 2. And you recruit her. And then, if you control a card with cost 1 or 2 on your turn, +1 power. Cyborg, play 2 equipment. If you control an equipment, +1 power. And so on. That's how they work. That's what they do. Besides all of that, you may also choose to play with the optional event cards. These event cards would be shuffled into the main deck. And at the beginning of your turn, as you are replenishing the lineup, if you flip over one of these, then you are going to have to set it aside next to the Nemesis, the supervillain, and that power is going to be in effect for the rest of for a while anyway, not for the rest of the game necessarily, because let's say a couple of them are in effect. And by the way, you don't replenish that spot when that card comes up. Whenever someone gets rid of a super villain, they are also going to pick one of these and get rid of it as well. And the other ones stick around. So there are 10 of those that would be shuffled into the deck. It's possible for there to be a few. It's possible for some of them to stick around for a while. Some will go away quickly, things like that. Once this is gone, by the way, at the beginning of the next round, we flip over the next one. It's got some effect that it deals when it first shows up. And then the players are going to attempt to get rid of that by, in this case, paying 10 and defeating that supervillain. And that's pretty much all there is to the game. Try to get the most points, as I said, and you win. So let's go back up top. Let me tell you what I think of it. I'm going to talk briefly about this one in comparison to some of the other Cerberus System games, specifically the DC deck building ones. So here we go. All right, so that's it. Let's kick it off with thematic ties. I would say that the Teen Titans Go theme on this deck building system works a little bit better than it usually does in the other ones, because for one thing, the how silly the premise is and how silly the cartoon is kind of jives with the idea of having supervillains join your deck of cards and recruiting heroes and villains alike and sort of having, anything happen. And then you include the events, which are also very tongue-in-cheek and very silly, and the entire theme is, while still certainly could be anything and feels pasted on, and they've done this system in many settings, is a little bit easier to swallow because it's a little silly, and so it goes hand in hand with that theme. The aesthetics here are great, much like the DC deck building game and everything that's sort of come after that. The cards are vibrant. I like the look of the artwork on these. It all looks congruent. It all is very attractive. So I like this one. It's sort of the same thing we've seen in some of the other ones with, panel grabs and screen grabs and things like that. But it all looks very good, and it looks like an energetic game. I like that very much. The replayability here, I would say, is fine. There's quite a bit of, you're gonna go through basically all of the supervillains except one, so you'll be seeing the same ones. The deck is fairly large. There's quite a bit in there. You've got all of the heroes, the superheroes, so you can definitely mix and match there. And then, of course, the ones you don't pick become sidekicks. So the replayability out of the box for a 2-player only game, I think, is good. I would say it's higher than the other 2-player product that I'm familiar with anyway, was the Batman vs. Joker 2-player pack they came out with. And I think the replayability for this one out of the box is better than for that. The game length, I still have problems with. I've always had problems with the game length in this game, the DC deck building game and all of the spin-offs. It's just too long for what it is. They tell you to remove one supervillain, and you either have to burn through them all or run out the entire deck of cards. I think this game outstays its welcome just about every time. And I think that about all of them. This is not something that's just this version. So, having said that, if you think I'm crazy and you don't agree with me that the DC deck building game is too long, then don't worry about it. This is the same as that. I just think they've all been too long, and they outstay their welcome. By the last third of the game or so, I'm dealing with so many effects. I'm tackling so many plus ones and plus twos and this and that it becomes a little too heavy for what I want the game to be. And I don't mean heavy as in difficult. I just mean there's a bunch of upkeep, right? I mean, I can figure out the rules. I just think the turns start to become longer and there's a lot more minutia. And then just in general, the game feels too long. The ease of play, as I said, I think starts off beautifully and then becomes just bogged down by last third or so, as I mentioned. I just find there's too many little powers, too many little rules, and this one does not alleviate that issue by throwing in the sidekicks, which in theory, so on paper, are great. And I like the idea of all the characters you don't pick becoming sidekicks. But they just add on to the rule checking, the awareness required, if you would, to play without making mistakes. I now have to worry about all the sidekicks out there. And while my opponent has them, I can recruit them. So I can never really stop thinking about them unless I have them myself. I need to be on top of all of those little powers besides having locations that I played in play and my own superpower and every card I played, etc., etc. So it compounds the issue that I had with the other games, which was, man, it's a little too much near the end of the game with these crazy turns. This compounds that problem with the sidekicks. And then lastly, tactics and strategy, luck, things like that. It's about the same as any other game in the line, I would say, as far as the tactics you can employ. They did a lot. A lot of the cards here talk about get +1 power per sidekick you control, or steal a sidekick, or whatever. So there's a lot of focus on the sidekicks. You can't really remove them, is what I'm saying, if you wanted to do it without them, and you're playing with this deck of cards. So I like that. It opens up a new avenue of design space that they are exploring, and that's neat, but it does not alleviate my previous point about it becoming a little much, So having said all that, overall, I think I like the theme here. I like the way the game looks, and I enjoy this system fine. You know what I mean? But I certainly would say I enjoy the second half of the game, or maybe the last third, let's say, less than I enjoy the first 2/3 of the game, in which I can take turns relatively easily. I'm enjoying still building my deck and finding neat little things happening later on. I'm just sitting for a while my opponent takes a turn. It's a good thing that it's just for 2 players, because otherwise I'd be taking a long time. The only difference is, if I was playing with more people, there would be fewer sidekicks for me to keep track of. So that's, that's a toss-up, really, at the end of the day. So I don't dislike the game. I enjoy it. I think it's one that I'm going to probably play a few more times, but it's not one that I expected, I guess, going into it with the silly theme and the Teen Titans Go, paint job on top of that it would feel to me lighter and that it would be shorter than some of the other offerings in the system, some of the more quote-unquote serious superhero games. But it's not. It's about the same or more. So while I enjoy what's going on here to a degree, right, I'm not sure if I would keep it, say, to play with like a nephew or something, because I think they just get bored about halfway through when the game refuses to end, So again, if you're a fan already of the system, you liked what you saw, or you like the idea of the sidekicks, you don't have a problem with the game length, go for it. It's well put together, If you are someone who is just discovering the system, unless you are a huge fan of the Teen Titans Go, I would probably go for one of the other starting sets, either the original or one of the other large boxes that'll give you everything you need, and it seems to fit the theme better. It's just gonna, work out just as well, and it'll be multiplayer for one thing. So there you go. That is Teen Titans Go. Thanks for tuning in and checking this out with me. I appreciate it. I will see you next time.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. And you've been watching The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.